How are you communicating now to like the organizations you talk to about integrating artificial intelligence into their operations?
From a application standpoint, it's the ability to ensure that good data side of things. If you are using high-end EHR system, that information is being fed in properly, that information is obviously secure, and then obviously can run through your system, along with pulling in other vendors that have that secure type of data set. That is a big element.
Hey everyone, this is Theo Harvey. I'm super excited about another podcast around medical success secrets for all you independent doctors out there. We're talking about artificial intelligence or AI and how this innovation is changing healthcare for the better. I have a special guest today. I have Eric Doherty. Eric, how are you today?
Hey, great, Theo. How are you doing today?
Good. Wonderful. So if you guys don't know, Eric is a global executive leader. He's always looking for ways to improve healthcare and the well-being of others and has been working in this industry for several years. Eric has extensive healthcare executive leadership experience leading $250 million to $500 million organizations, helping them generate over $30 billion to $100 billion in true value. He's served global senior executive roles from leading companies like GlaxoSmithKline, Abbott Laboratories, AstraZeneca, etc. Eric holds an MBA in International Marketing and another MBA in Management from Washington University and St. Louis University, respectively. He obtained an Executive Leadership Graduate Certificate from Harvard University and a Global Operational Leadership Graduate Certificate from St. Louis University. Eric, this is an impressive background, and I know we're going to talk about some interesting things in healthcare with AI. So we're going to get right into it. Let's start with a little statistic. What we understand, especially doctors are working with patients, one of the biggest things is patient compliance, right? Especially around medication compliance. And what we see is statistics around this is that 75% of adults are not compliant in some way. And 50% of the chronically ill patients don't adhere to their treatment plans. These are some things that are driving things like higher healthcare costs, higher healthcare hospital readmissions, deaths, things to that nature. What are your thoughts about the problem with patient compliance, Ryan? Why is it important for the quality of care?
Well, again, it's those outcomes. I mean, if you've got a patient who isn't taking their medication or isn't taking it properly, if they're not doing the rehab course that they're supposed to be doing, let's say after a knee replacement or a hip replacement, or even just a minor injury like an ankle twist, if that patient is not adhering to the doctor's wishes and obviously the rehab opportunity, and then obviously not taking those medications properly, you run a number of risks. You got the risk, obviously, of that patient having a further ongoing issue with their medical side effects and all of that goes along with that. You've got the issue of obviously cost. So if the patient's now having to go back to see the physician or nurse practitioner or PA to get reevaluated, you've got that cost. And then again, if the medication is not being taken or not being taken correctly, then you've got maybe a potential other prescription or prescriptions that have to be written for that patient to get that condition under control. So it just adds and mounts on to the actual cost to that patient, obviously directly, but also to the healthcare system. And for that thing to linger, that's a major issue. And it's an issue, unfortunately, that's been going on for decades. And so I think with the new technologies that are number one already there, but also I think as they are coming out, there are improving technologies that can, I think, really make a difference to those patients going forward. And then also to the health system, there's definitely room for improvement, I guess is the best way to put it.
I agree 100%. When we talk to doctors every day, the biggest thing is just patient compliance, right? Not taking their medications. You mentioned some of them, but like simple things like forgetting to take it or trust factor, right? Or saying, hey, doctor said, I have to take this antibiotic, but guess what? I feel better. So I'm just not going to finish the medication. Yeah. And so we see that tons and tons of times. And unfortunately, it happens in a lot of underserved communities as well. Just that lack of just taking medications and doing what the doctor says. And that's becoming more prevalent. So we have all these new medications, right? New tech therapies that we're developing, but the challenge is always the medication. If it's not taken, then it's not going to have any results. And you're not going to get better outcomes. The patient's not taking it. So we see that all the time.
Throw in a couple of things, I've got a pretty good background on both cardiovascular side and the diabetes side. Well, on the cardiovascular side, it'd be more kind of connected with cholesterol and with patients with high cholesterol needing medication. And on the diabetes side, with obviously the need for some type of insulin type of replacement medication as well. And so what I found in kind of both of those disease states, you've got a patient who's taking a cholesterol med, they feel fine. I mean, obviously you don't know if your arteries are obviously having reduction in kind of the cholesterol element within them. And obviously on the diabetes front, if a patient feels fine, is that A1C truly being lowered by this medication? The patient doesn't know directly, obviously. And so that is something where these patients, they'll take the medication for a week, maybe a month, maybe 2 months, feel better, and then obviously stop that medication. And that is obviously none of what should be done and what is good for the patient, and again, good for the system.
I agree. So let's kind of talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, right? I mean, that's just the buzzword of 2024, basically. We saw the explosion with ChatGPT and the large language model introduced to the world with the end of 2023. Now we're just seeing, more and more technologies coming to the forefront. We'll talk a little bit about what we're seeing AI being used, obviously, with helping with documentation and medical billing, maybe even with diagnoses and helping patients with that. But we're going to talk specifically around looking at patient compliance. So if we kind of want to solve this problem with artificial intelligence, what data, and that's where it starts, right? Understanding the data set. That's healthcare in general, right? Clinical trials and understanding data is really important in everything that we do here. What data do you believe that we need to kind of get started to understand how to even solve this problem of patient compliance when you kind of talk to your client?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is making sure it's good data. I think what we're finding in many aspects is that you've got data that's being put into systems and data that's being analyzed that potentially is not either up-to-date data or relevant data. And obviously, if it's not up-to-date or not relevant data, it's not good data, not something you want to be using. Good example is claims data. A lot of the future projections within healthcare are set around claims data. They took information from 6 months, year and a half ago of kind of how patients were put up through the system. And unfortunately, that data is old. I would consider that bad data. The key now is to take data real time in basically the same day, the same minute, the same second that is coming in from that patient, and taking that data and have it run through analytics. One of the things that I want to make sure that everybody's clear on, and I'm sure a lot of the physicians that are listening to this do get it, but there's a difference between ML and generative AI, machine learning and generative AI. Machine learning AI has been around for decades. Think in terms of jet engines, think in terms of manufacturing, think in terms of transportation, where you've got data that comes in, you make a machine learning generative AI algorithm that is based on that data. You want basically a certain set of outcomes coming out of that. You then get the data analyzed and pushed back to give you those answers. That's kind of ML side. The generative AI is totally separate, where they're taking kind of the ML stance, they're taking the algorithm information, they're taking that information in, running analytics off of it. The difference is that with Gen AI, you're actually able to take that data and say, hey, I can improve it this way, or I can improve it that way. That is where new tech is going. And so whenever you've got data coming in from a sensor source, from a monitor source, from an electronic health record source, that information that's fed into a generative AI type of setting is revolving continuously to improve those assets from a data analytics standpoint coming back to you. So that is typically what will happen within the kind of new realm of Gen AI. And so again, I think when it comes to a patient that needs to be monitored for, obviously in this case, medication adherence or rehab adherence, when you are able to get that data coming back and then improve on that data, your outcomes are going to be immensely improved.
I like to put the other side of this argument, right? And so for those that don't know, these generative AI systems that they built, right, they're kind of modeled after our own brain processes, right? Creating these large neural networks, right, that kind of simulate connections and make assumptions based on those connections, just like we do, right? Human brain evolved over billions of years to do so. So they're trying to mock it at that level when it comes to the AI systems. The challenge there is if you don't know, these AI systems hallucinate, right? And so sometimes come with these wild guesses, but it'd be totally inaccurate. And that's what some of the things we saw still to this day, even unfortunately with large language models like ChatGPT giving just blatantly false information, right? And so, what are your thoughts on that, right? How can you use these generative AI tools, right, with patient compliance so that you steer away from these type of scenarios?
Just making sure that your data is clean. I mean, I think that's a big key where I think in a lot of those instances, the fogginess of the answers or the fogginess of the relevance of the information that's coming back, a lot of that is because there's some bad data that's in the system that allows that to happen. And so you really want to make sure that your data that's coming in is clean and good. But I also think that as time goes on, hopefully sooner rather than later, that information, that fog will actually be dissipated because of the fact that you'll be able to run more and more better data analysis off of that information to give you better outcomes, hoping that's the case.
Yeah. I mean, so I think there's two pathways that are kind of in development when it comes to AI, right? What we've seen, obviously, you have open AI, which is in essence a closed system. We
Yep.
don't understand how it's built but it works. And so they're kind of selling their model out there. And then now you have Meta or Facebook creating that kind of like their open generative AI system that you can use your own data and build out your own models, right? And
Right.
so it does seem like this interesting kind of dichotomy that's kind of evolving. Not unlike, I mean, I'm an old tech guy, not unlike open Linux machines versus PC, right? Is this closed versus open systems and development of artificial intelligence in this model? And how does this affect healthcare? The data is so important. And also, we have regulations around HIPAA laws, right, that protect patient PHI, public health information. And so we want to make sure that that information is very protected and when we use these systems. And so I think that's some understanding as you kind of talk to vendors, from my understanding, just understanding how to kind of develop their models and their data that they're using so that the data is not aggregating the data, right? So you don't identify a specific patient information is key to kind of helping develop these models. When you think about vendors developing models in patient compliance, but just in general, what are some innovative ways you've seen to kind of use the data and create innovative type technologies around this, right? So we avoid some of the HIPAA violations and things like that that can evolve, unfortunately, with healthcare.
You basically want to make sure you de-identify that data. That's a big key. And I think it allows you to then have a much better scope of the analytics part of it. By doing that, as you mentioned, that, if you've got a data set where you want to make sure that the HIPAA compliance is still there, the ability to de-identify that information is key. I think the one thing from an inherent standpoint is the ability to just capture the data specifically. A lot of times now they're moving towards the applications of, let's say, a medication model, where you literally have a cap that would have a sensor built into it, where when you twist or turn the cap or move the cap, it shows that the actual patient's been at least accessing the bottle. That's one thing. Again, obviously there's some deterrence to that because obviously if they open the bottle, does it really make sense? Did they really take their medication? Yes or no, you don't know. The other side too that you can do is actually put on sensors to a patient. So if you've got the ability to trace and track information coming from a specific patient, be it heart, be it respiratory, be it potentially temperature, all of those kind of aspects of data come into play quite nicely. And then the aspect of any type of video. So if you've got the ability to actually have a camera set up on a patient, be it in a hospital setting or a long-term care or assisted living setting, or even at home where you can actually pick up the potential of movement for that patient who opens the canister, takes the medication out, puts the medication inside their mouth, then takes a drink of water or some other type of solution to actually drink it down. That motion part of it can be captured. So from the data side, you can take all of that together, push it into a system, run your algorithms through it, push it back and actually show whether or not that patient took the medication, number one, but also hopefully over time, figure out whether the medication then also working based on all the data that's coming in.
There are wearable technologies that are, obviously continuous glucose monitoring, CGMs.
Yep.
People are wearing that to get consistent information around blood sugar levels. Those are taken off, obviously, but even some of the technologies where patients have to take the devices, like for instance, or use the devices like blood pressure monitors, as well as, the old school prick finger glucose monitors, things like scales and things like that, where you actually have to do something. We're using AI to kind of help with compliance of just using the data, right? Or even for physical therapy, right? Patients have to do something. So for us, we're using AI to kind of encourage patients, right? To make it more personalized. So using systems that make culturally relevant language decisions. So basically in the language of choice for the patient, whether they speak Hindi, Spanish, Mandarin, and using AI to kind of help create that scale, that also be able to kind of make it more personalized, right? Let's say there's some general information about the patient that we know, whether they did or did not step on the scale that day, right? Or if they have certain goals, reminding that patient that, hey, you're trying to hit these goals. You're not going to make these goals unless you measure yourself every day to meet those goals. And so that's kind of how we see patient compliance when we do our monitoring of patients at home. Because in our mind, patient compliance looks at not just they take the medications, but they do something as well. And
Yeah.
so very similar to, pharma, right? Making sure they open the cat lid and things like that. Our model is like, did they actually step on the scale? Did they actually push the button to take their blood pressure reading? Because we know from looking at data that if they just do that and they get consistent at that, it becomes a habit. And over time, their number, they get uncontrolled hypertension becomes controlled hypertension because they see the numbers every day.
The other thing too, like you can place the sensors and, even on our phones nowadays, there's the ability to trace and track your movements as far as how far you've gone or how many steps you've taken, et cetera. So again, all of that data coming in, you can actually then follow that patient along to make sure that they're running their mile a day or they're walking 10 flights of stairs a day to make sure that they're traced and tracked through that methodology.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, fall prevention, right? If you're looking at older patients, making sure you kind of modulate as a big cost driver for a lot of patients who are aging at home, looking at tools and technologies that can look at that and be preventive ahead of the curve before a patient, does fall. The old school alert models, right? When patients fall down, have to push something, those are going to be replaced with more of these more proactive systems, which I think is
a little better than the clapper, right?
Yeah, let's take it back to the clapper. Yes, definitely. So, and I think as that technology evolves, I think we're going to have a lot of data sets. To be honest with you, there's a lot of data on all of us from what we search on Google to what the algorithms. I mean, if you're on Facebook any length of time, you'll be amazed about why the ads are popping up for you specifically because they have so much data on you. So imagine if they marry that data set, right, with your health data set. They're now making predictions on your health decisions that you're making, right? Oh, we saw you at the Target and you bought this soda. Maybe their health will be a little bit deteriorated because they drink a little bit more soda than they should for their age. Right. So those are the things that I think that people are a little bit more afraid of a little bit. Do you remember this story? It was years ago. It was about how Target was using data to understand that dad got coupons for birth control and he didn't know his daughter was pregnant. There was a story about that years ago, maybe like 10, 15 years ago. And this is before the advent of AI, right? Where the system can monitor seeing who was buying what the potential was that someone was going to need coupons for like certain type of birth control scenarios. And it got to the dad who didn't know his daughter was pregnant. And so those are kind of things I think healthcare does get a little bit scary when it comes to some of those things. But how can people keep it focused on like positive aspects of technology? How can doctors feel more comfortable about technology and AI and the use of it in their practices now currently?
I think that really depends on kind of their outlook of technology. I think a lot of folks, in general have a pretty good handle that, hey, technology is here. The generative AI technology is here to stay and will be here going forward until something else comes along that could try to replace it from a tech standpoint. I think embracing it now is a good thing. I do want to say you want to embrace it with caution. Again, if it's good data in, you're going to have probably good data and information coming back to you. Unfortunately, if it's suspicious data, if it's data that's not, I guess, from a technology standpoint, good data in the stance of just junk information coming into the system, then that can cause problems. And I think, again, if you have kind of that cautionary approach, I think that's a good thing. As we move along, as companies like an Epic or Cerner now, obviously with Oracle being part of Cerner, both organizations are using AI within their systems, and they're doing a number of applications across their technologies, across their platforms to kind of better their systems and obviously better healthcare. But again, there are issues that they run into. And so you just want to make sure that from a technology standpoint that you do have that cautionary stance. If you get information that you might question, information on a specific patient that might go, is that really truly accurate? You may have to do a little more digging before you make that suggestion or that written note to that, basically you write that prescription for that patient. So you just want to make sure it's cautionary type of future prediction.
It's like trust but verify, right? So yes, this information came to you, was quick. And sometimes we associate quickness and surety, right, with assurance. And so these algorithms and systems can come back with an answer pretty quickly. But to your point, understanding of how does this come about? Let's verify with a couple other sources and then make a quality decision. And I think that's the pathway for healthcare. It has to be AI and human, right? It can't just be AI by itself to make basically life or death decisions for human beings. And so I think that's kind of like the standard there, what we're going with. So it'll be interesting to see how this evolves. And one of the things I'm seeing a lot of my doctors start using, some low level technology tools like dictation services, right, to help administration in can make it a little bit faster for them. Some billing tools, maybe to help with prior authorization, right? There's some technology tools and AI that's helping speed that process up. So making sure they understand what patients qualify for reimbursements prior to going through the normal processes of delivering services. So things like that are coming to the forefront, where we're seeing more and more doctors kind of play around with it, especially some of the younger ones, right, who are interested in this. But there's a lot of burden, because I know the core, a lot of the doctors that we talk to is patient care, right? Making sure that top of mind, that they're doing what they need to do, make sure the patient gets better. But sometimes trying to crush the other stuff in there gets a little difficult. So how are you communicating now to like the organizations you talk to about integrating artificial intelligence into their operations and things like that? What are some high level things that you recommend? So let's say some of the multi-specialty groups or the accountable care organizations we talk to, what are some high level enterprise-wide thoughts that they bring AI in that they need to think through?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I was at an event yesterday afternoon with a group that looks at high level, basically the security of systems. And so basically looking through a healthcare organization or a baking organization or a manufacturing organization, and basically looking at their entire scope of technology landscape within their organization and ensuring within their system that everything is, number one, working properly, but number two, ensuring that there's not an issue with any type of outside application, i.e. a threat type of application coming into the organization. So that's a big thing. And I think as we're moving forward, you mentioned HIPAA earlier, protecting the records, protecting information of the patients, protecting that data. That is kind of the highest level that you can have. And, I want to make sure that physicians that are listening to this, that's your probably key priorities, making sure that your systems are working correctly and obviously very secure. So that's number one. Number two is really from a application standpoint, it's the ability to ensure that good data side of things. If you are using high-end EHR system like an Epic, Sun, or Allscripts, et cetera, that information is being fed in properly, that information is obviously secure, and then obviously can run through your system, along with pulling in other vendors that have that secure type of data set. That is a big element. And then I think the last kind of point is just, again, as you mentioned, Theo, it is one of those things where you want to have that cautionary kind of viewpoint on the outbound information that's coming back to you, to ensure that data is good going in to give you that feed of information in a good way. You just want to make sure that you don't 110% trust the data. You might want to trust the data at 90 to 100%. And just again, if you have that kind of itching in the back of your neck, then do questioning.
You hit the nail on the head with that. So security, data integrity, and just outcome verification, right? And put those three into a system from an enterprise level, you can have a process that at least starts the beginning ways of understanding how you can implement artificial intelligence and other technologies into your enterprise. So that makes sense. I do want to pinpoint security. We didn't talk about on this one. I think a lot of my practices were impacted by that Change Healthcare hack, right? That big hack that happened to Clearinghouse.
And the CrowdStrike one recently with Delta here in Atlanta. That's another
exactly.
Yep.
CrowdStrike. That's specific for transportation video, but definitely for healthcare. Change Healthcare was massive, right? I think 800,000 doctors were affected by this. Some of the mid-sized practices that we work with, because they couldn't get payments out or receive payments through the clearinghouse, and the clearinghouse basically cleans up the systems to make sure they're easy to submit to centers of Medicare or Medicaid services for reimbursement. Because that clearinghouse was clogged up and couldn't get anything out. A lot of them were struggling to make payroll because they weren't getting their reimbursements in time.
Right.
And so, to your point, that was a huge hack. I mean, basic hackers got into the system, held it hostage over Bitcoin, and said for $21 million, we'll release this information. So unfortunately, we'll probably see more of that, because these systems, if you don't know, are very old, built on old technology, old solutions, old programming languages that have a lot of vulnerabilities in it. And so having, to your point, security baked in and understanding that in your systems. And sometimes security to me is just a matter of also just having redundancy in the system. A lot of them just only had Change Healthcare, right? They didn't have a second clearinghouse, right? And in the manual process to submit claims, they forgot that. People who did it long gone from the system organization. So they were struggling, right? And so security is about also just, what happens if, right? Just having plans around that can kind of help you.
The one thing that really came out of even this meeting I was in yesterday, you got your on-prem type of data source and you have your cloud data source. They're two separate entities. Ensuring you understand that is key, because you have your systems in place for the on-prem and you have your systems in place for the cloud-based type of systems. Because of that, they talk, but they're separate kind of entities. You have to look at security measures within each. The one thing that really came out of that was if you've got the cloud side, and I'll primarily focus on that because that was what this organization did, was they had the ability to basically look at aspects throughout the entire system in basic real time to see whether or not there were infiltrations at a certain point, which is great. The problem is that a lot of times when you have your technologists looking over this information, they get these alerts. They're not adhering to those alerts. They're not listening to them, or they've got so many other alerts to deal with that they kind of put them on the back table, unfortunately. So it causes more problems. The one kind of element and takeaway was a lot of these folks that are trying to infiltrate your systems, they're sitting there for months. They're literally in your system. They're just kind of seeing and viewing things without trying to pop alerts around. And again, you've got to look at trying to find a really really cool security system that can oversee that and find those types of elements within your system.
Alert fatigue is real in healthcare and in security technology.
Yep.
Nurses getting alerts all the time for patients. And so how do you kind of minimize that, but also make sure to prioritize the right alerts get to you is key. And, AI, artificial intelligence could potentially help with that, right?
Exactly. It does. Yeah. Yeah.
So
hopefully, across the table if it's done right.
absolutely. So I think you and I are both positive about the advent of technology. I mean, I think at the end of the day, healthcare has been resistant to technology for years and years. And obviously with the advent of the Healthcare Act, with digitizing healthcare records, they've been pushed into the 20th century, maybe not the 21st century. And so now that this data is all digitized, now they're going to be faced with these issues that a lot of enterprises have to deal with: security, data integrity, and verifying the outcome of that data set. Wow, this is a great conversation. Really enjoyed it, Eric. Where can people find you, and what's next for you?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn, so definitely link up with me on there. Hopefully, there you can put that out there. Definitely loving the aspect of technology and what it does. Do a lot of speaking around it, and really enjoy the information that I can get, obviously, to help others. And so, anything that you all can throw my way, please do.
Perfect. Well, hey, everyone, thank you for your time, Eric. Hope this was great information. We'll have some more information later. If you could check out our podcast, everyone, for latest information about innovation in healthcare and this new normal. Take care.
Thanks, Theo.